Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, where church leaders, pastors, and community builders come together to have real, honest conversations about faith, ministry, and life. We believe that leadership in the church is more than just sermons and services. It's about the heart behind the ministry, the community it serves, and the challenges that we face together.
I'm Robert, and I'm excited to join you each week as we dive into practical tips, big ideas, and meaningful conversations that will inspire and equip you as a leader, no matter the size of your church.
And I'm Tony, with a passion for storytelling, leadership, and vision. I'll be here to help uncover those deeper truths behind ministry life. Together, we're building something real, where authenticity, grace, and growth meet.
And while we may occasionally stray off script, one thing's for sure, we always keep it fun, entertaining, and most importantly, grounded in truth. So grab a seat where there's always room at the table for meaningful conversations, inspiring stories, and a little bit of laughter along the way.
Let's get started. So, Robert, we're back here. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been together and talking through stuff, and a lot has happened in our world in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess did we do a podcast 2 weeks ago? I guess we did. It's such a blur. I can't even remember. And then the next day things started like, oh, there's this hurricane and it's coming. And then, um, and you and I were talking just right before the show. If I'm sure a lot of people are local-ish to where we live, but there's also quite a few listeners that aren't from Northeast Tennessee, kind of Southwest Virginia, Western North Carolina, and we live in this little weird bubble. And I don't say anything I'm about to say to be flippant or light, but even a few weeks ago we were talking about just how bad allergies are here and pollen, and really in this bubble it collects pollen, but that's really about the only thing we have that happens on a consistent basis that is really weather season, mother nature kind of induced. And
Snow.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, well, yeah, but we don't get much of that anymore, and I guess the mountains do, but I don't feel like we get a ton of snow.
That's relative, man. Because when you grew up in Las Vegas, what we get here, when you can't get off your driveway without spending 3 hours with a shovel in your hand,
Yeah,
that's a blizzard.
you need to buy a hook for the front of your truck and clean that off so that you get a big plow. Yeah, I mean, and so for me, I mean, we moved to Virginia in '89 from Alabama, and so that we had like the first winter we were here, the first snow we had, which was a small snow, was like a foot, and it was triple the snow I'd ever seen in my life. And so we just you just get things, man, and then Helene came and changed our world almost a week ago. So it has been or sorry, a week and a half ago, my bad. It's just been crazy since then.
Yeah, it has been. And the last time we recorded, we did the episode on losing Bruce.
Yeah.
And this coming Sunday, we have his memorial service, his celebration of life service, as try to stay positive with that.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting that my wife made the comment to me that my dad died March 5th, 2020, and very unexpectedly. And 2 days later, the world fell apart with COVID, and we were shut down, and you were just seeing the sprinklings of it in the news coming over. I think we had one case reported in the United States out in Washington or something like that. And then my dad died, and the world fell apart, and said it was as if the world went into mourning for losing my dad.
Mm.
And then flash forward, now 4 years later, we lose Bruce. And then just a few days after that, again, we face the next travesty, devastation that we face. And I know for most of the world, this was just another news headline. But I think for our listeners that are not in our area, everything that you've been reading about the destruction from Hurricane Helene is where we're at. That is where we both are. In fact, right now we're remote. We're not together in the studio today. You are sitting, I hate to use this term, but you are quite literally sitting in ground zero right now.
Yeah, I
Where
mean,
you're
it's
at was one of the most devastated, hard hit places of the hurricane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, a mile from some pretty rough stuff that happened. Um, People maybe saw the hospital that had people stranded on top of it, the Black Hawks were coming in. And the thing is that like I had friends, people that I've sat across the dinner table from that were on top of that hospital, and they were up there and patients were up there. I know one person was calling and just, saying goodbye to his family. I mean, it was just those types of moments that you start to hear the stories of people that you're connected to, not stories that seem far, seem distant, or, like right now. I mean, the stories are when will school go back in and things like that. And I could tell you seven different iterations of the story that I've heard, but these are really firsthand, experiences and responses. I had friends that do whitewater rafting and things like that. And I know that they were out there trying to get rafts over to get people in these rafts to get them back. And then the waters got too quick and things got too fast. And it just, they couldn't do that. And I just remember sitting and just watching this in real time on social media, watching it on my phone, going, what in the world, man, can we not just get there quicker? And, that's easy for me to say. I mean, I don't have any understanding at all of how things like that work. But yeah, we were fortunate. Our church wasn't affected, and so we've been able to kind of be here and be a part of just helping and being around. But at the same time, I mean, there's churches and friends who, we were shoveling out 2.5, 3 feet of mud out of their basement of their church, trying to get things, cleaned up and ready so that they can start, meeting again and getting their life kind of back to normal. So.
Yeah, I think for me, that Friday was an eerie day because we talked not too long ago. We did our episode. I mean, I guess it was less than a month ago that we did our episode on reflecting on September 11th. And we talked through where were we when that all happened and our different experiences on being on different parts of the country. And I talked about in that episode how my 21, 22-year-old self at the time didn't realize the magnitude until later that day. And I actually told the story of walking into the church office and seeing
Mhm.
our church admin sitting there with just tears streaming down her face. And that's when I kind of realized this is a big deal. This is really big. And it was kind of the same thing on Friday that we woke up. We knew that there was a big storm, but we had no idea what the effects were. We lost power at our house. We were without power for about 9 hours, and we're on a well. So when we lose power, we also lose water. We had no internet access. Cell service was completely down. So we really didn't have much of a concept or idea of what was going on. It just seemed like another storm. We went out and walked our property. We can get flooded pretty bad with big, heavy rains and downed trees and stuff like that. We have 13 acres in the country out here. And the places that normally flood were not bad at all. And so we didn't really think that much had happened until my wife went out later in the afternoon. And we live, so the major river that flooded and caused all the damage in our area, for those that are not around here, is the Nolichucky River. We live less than a mile from the Nolichucky. The Nolichucky is right down the street from us. And so my wife left to go run a couple of errands and just get out and do a couple things that had to be done because we didn't have power or water or in any of that. And she drove down the way that you would go, that we would normally go to Irwin, that we do, several times a week, multiple times a week. The dump that I go to, we don't have trash service where we live. So there's a convenience center, a dump that's less than a mile from our house that I go to 2 to 3 times a week. So she went that way and got to the end and the road was gone. Literally less than a mile from us, a house that sits on a corner of the road that we live on, the house was completely submerged, and a truck that was sitting in the big truck that was sitting in the front yard was completely underwater. You could just barely see the ceiling. I mean, less than a mile from our house. And subsequently came to find out that that road that we travel to head to Irwin when we're going to church, where you're sitting right now, that bridge is gone. It no longer exists. The dump that I went to multiple times a week is in the river, gone. Um, and so then we began to slowly see this is a bigger deal than we originally thought. And it was kind of eerie how just less than a mile from us, complete total devastation. Um, you could walk to where there's just total devastation in less than 10 minutes. And then as we got our power back and subsequently our water back in about 9 hours. So there are still people that are without power and water and will be
Hmm.
for weeks. We got ours back within 9 hours. So we began to do the same thing that you're talking about, do the Facebook scrolling. And our local news did not do a good job of keeping up with what was going on. And so you had to go to the on the ground newscasters, those with Facebook and Instagram, and posting pictures and videos of what they were experiencing. And it was devastating. Immediately began to realize the scope of it and what this was going to mean for our region and our community.
Yeah, we started getting a lot of phone calls because people knew where we lived, um, and it was just these questions. I mean, how are you guys? And I would always say, physically we are fine. And they're like, were you guys affected? And it's like, we live about 20 minutes because they're like, man, your church is there. And I'm like, yeah, but we live about 20 minutes from our church. And so, as far as like life goes for us, we were without power for about 4 seconds. I mean, it flipped off I picked my phone up to see what time it was, just so I'd know, okay, how long, just where we start at. And before my phone lit up, the power was back on. I mean, it flickered one time. We didn't have to boil one pot of water. We had access to gasoline. I mean, we had a few limbs in our yard, took about 40 minutes to clean up. I mean, that was the kind of life that we were just, it was just very, very different. And to see our friends and things, we have AT&T, and so our cell service was never out, and all of our friends with T-Mobile and Verizon, um, we were out with one of our sons had something, and we took several of his friends to go to that event. We were heading towards Knoxville, and as we were getting there to go on T-Mobile, as we switched towers, they started getting cell service. Well, driving back later that night, my iPad has data, and so there was a football game they were wanting to watch. So we just stuck my iPad up and turned it on. I mean, and here up in our area, T-Mobile and Verizon have no service, and people who really need to connect to the world. Um, and this is the thing, like but let me finish up. I guess people who need to connect to the world can't even get a text message out. And then we're driving from Knoxville back towards Johnson City, and we're watching a football game on an iPad just because of cell towers that got wiped out. Um, and I think that's the thing that's so hard is like, we live in this world that's so modern technology and we have all the internet and the cell phones and all those things. But when stuff starts to happen, we just aren't really equipped to go back to 1950. I've got one friend that her great grandmother lives just across the state line in North Carolina, and she has dug in her heels, and she's like, I am not leaving. And they're literally talking 6 months before she gets power back because the roads are wiped out and the power supply, the power plant, whichever the station, sorry, the power station that they have set up was wiped out with the water. And so it was actually ripped off its foundation and taken away. And so, you kind of get to that place and you just go, this is really tough. I mean, here's a 90-something-year-old lady who honestly is probably more equipped than this 48-year-old, but to handle this situation. But, she's just like, hey, this is my home. I'm not leaving and I'm staying. And so now, they're trying to figure out how do we care? How do we invest? How do we continue to love and support and help make this a doable thing? Because, yesterday it was in the 40s when the day started, and you just start to go. I was sitting out at the front of one of our high schools. And just helping loading stuff up for people as they pull in. And one of the workers walked in, just good morning. And they're just like, man, it really got cool. And not a lot of expression. And I said, yeah, the weather's really changed. Probably had a little bit of a chuckle like that and things. And not, and I just said, yeah, really cold. And her demeanor just totally, not mean, not upset, just, she was just like, I am so concerned about the people on the mountain. and who have no power, who have no water. And when you're handing out clothes and you're doing these things and you're sitting with people and they pull up and they're just, I mean, it's crazy. We're in a natural disaster and people are almost embarrassed at times to go, hey, can I have some water? And we're like, how much water do you want? And they're like, oh man, just a case would be great. And they're like, how many people in your family? What do you need? And you end up giving a few cases of water and you do some stuff, but you have family, you have people, families walk up and they are like, hey, I've got 4 kids, single mom. I'm here with my sister, and we lost everything. And then you go out and you're helping them load stuff in their car after volunteers have helped them go through and get clothes and strollers and all the stuff that they need for their kids that range from, newborn up to probably 4 or 5 years old. Um, and and you're sitting there and they're like, yeah, our car, it wasn't like washed away, but you find out their car had water pretty much all the way up through it, but it's the only vehicle they've got, and there's no other way to get down. And yesterday, I think I was there. I think it's yesterday, and this lady walks up, and she's 2 weeks from having her first kid and lost everything, and she's like, "I just need something." And so you're walking through, and the emotion of that, of sitting, and I haven't. You've actually been up on the mountain. I've been out in another area that's not the Irwin area. I was over in the Carter County area, and I've been out by some high schools have been kind of lost and things like that. And I've helped, sump pump some basements, and I've helped clean up, a food pantry and stuff like that to where they can kind of get back to serving and caring for people and providing meals that are very much needed during this time. But, just sitting with people and being able to sit with them, to hear their story, to pray with them, to laugh when they want to laugh, to cry when they want to cry, has been an emotional, yeah, just an emotional roller coaster. And so, I'm gonna try and hold it together. I've been up I think we got up at 4:30 this morning, to go fix breakfast for first responders. And that's the crazy thing. We when we were coming back from Knoxville, we stopped at Bucky's and we're standing in line leaving a couple weeks ago. So we're a day and a half into this thing. And there's this officer there, and I say, "Is that Tulsa, Oklahoma?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "We're heading up," and they were literally coming to our area. And I'm sitting with my wife, and I mean, and she just starts to tear up and thank this guy in the middle of Bucky's. And he was just, I mean, it's just crazy. And that's the thing, is the outpouring of people just, I was shoveling at that church one day and they're like, hey, what's where's everybody from? People are telling stories. The guy's like, I'm from Kansas. And you're like, Kansas, how did you get here? Well, what happened? And he was like, I was watching the news. You all popped on the news and you said you needed help. And I thought, I can help. And I threw some shovels in my car and I just started driving. And I thought, nobody does that. But
Yeah.
we have seen that so much that there really are a lot of people who are generous, who are thoughtful, who are caring, and they're stepping into that space. And it's a game changer for stuff for sure. So
It's been amazing to see the way that our local community here has
yeah.
rallied. And we had the chance, like you said, the 2 days after we said we have to do something. And so we hopped in my truck and drove to Irwin to see what we could do. And my wife had heard about a church right up the street from your guys' church that
Hmm.
was kind of serving as a hub for things. And so we pulled up there and said, how could we help? And they're like, you have a truck. We've got to get stuff up the mountain to people who don't have anything.
You've got to
And
tell this whole story. I mean, I don't know if you want to tell all of it or not, but you've got to tell the bridge and all that.
so the initial reports were that every bridge in Washington and Unicoi County that crossed the Nolichucky was gone. Those were the initial reports that we were getting on late Friday and early Saturday. But then there was one bridge there were a couple bridges that survived, but one pretty significant bridge that survived right where, if you're a listener and you've seen the images of Interstate 26 that is gone, I mean, completely gone. Um, this bridge is right at that point, right at exit the 40 there. And the only bridge to cross over the river to get to some of these communities that were the hardest hit. And so we were running supplies there. We had people dropping off supplies at this distribution center, which was a church that just said, we're going to do this. And I think it's important that there was no government help at this point in time. This was
Mhm.
just the local community saying something has to be done. We have to help. And so a church that wasn't having services that morning said, we're going to open up our facility. We're going to get our people out here, and we're going to be a distribution center. And to just see the way that for 2 solid days, people were coming nonstop with supplies. And then we were loading them up in the back of pickup trucks and driving them up to the communities that were cut off and are still cut off, really. And what would be a 5-minute drive, if the interstate was open, was taking 50 minutes. And what's interesting is when we first put it in our GPS to see how do we get there, it was saying it was going to take us over 2 hours to get up there. But they had been able to clear some trees off of some roads and get us up there. And so we made several trips just loading up, 150 cases of water in the back of my 6-foot pickup truck bed and driving it up there to get there. And we had gone across this bridge, the story that you were referencing. We'd gone across this one bridge that was open probably 4 or 5 times. And then we come back and we pull into the church parking lot, and they've got a bunch of pickup trucks backed up to the church place, and all these volunteers quickly loading up. And the lady who's running the thing flags me down and says, pull up. And I go, what's going on? She said, we just got word that the bridge is compromised and they're going to be shutting down the bridge soon. So as soon as they shut down the bridge, there is no access to these 2 communities that we're trying to get stuff to. So we're trying to get as many supplies there as possible before they close the bridge. And so adrenaline just kicks in. You're like, load it up. So they load up the truck. We're like, let's go. And then you get to the foot of the bridge and you're like, hold on a second. She just told me they're getting ready to close this bridge because it's structurally not safe. And we're 50 feet off the ground with the rushing waters of the river immediately below us. So that was a little nerve-wracking, crossing that bridge 2 more times after they had said that they were going to close it down. They did close it down for a little while, but then they opened it back up the next day, and it's still open and structurally sound. So I don't think we were ever in any real danger of collapsing into the river. But it was so amazing to see the stories of people pulling up that, like you were saying, what we saw so many times is people pulling up and needing stuff, but also giving stuff. I'm dozens and dozens of people that would pull up and we'd say, are you here to pick up or drop off? And they'd say both. Our house is gone. So if we could get some water, but also we stopped off and bought some things at Walmart that people might need. They were all out of water. So if we could get a case or 2 of water, but here's some canned goods that we picked up that we wanted to drop off for other people that might have needs. And those type of stories again and again and again. And it was confusing. It was unorganized. It was erratic, but it was beautiful because there was no government agency there on the ground that has years and years of experience in running communities and natural disasters and recovery and relief efforts. It was just the body of Christ coming together and a community coming together and saying, there are people in need and we don't know what we're doing here. We don't know how to do this, but we're going to scrap through it the best that we can. And the number of times that you would go to look for someone in charge and there was no one in charge. And several times people came to me and said, hey, what do we do here? And I'm like, I don't know. Just drop it there. I don't know. Here, let's throw some water in the back of your car. And because it was just people trying to meet a need that they saw and could feel tangibly around them in their community and caring for the people that they know and love that maybe they'd never met before.
Yeah, and it's been crazy too. You talk about locally what happened, but then you start to step outside of that. Um, we um we just had a lot of people calling at our church going, hey, how can we give, how can we give, and people wanting to financially help and give things. And so we just created a link that people can go in and click and give, and then we've just taken that money and run it right back out into the efforts to help um support what's going on here. But it was it was something that moved so quickly and things. It was just unbelievable, that outpouring. But we have somebody in our church that works for a company it's a national company, and everybody's remote workers basically. And so they have salesmen and district managers and things like that in these different regions. Well, this guy calls me and he says, "Hey man, my company wants to get plugged in." And this guy lives like closer to the real devastation than I am at the church. I mean, so this guy's in it. I mean, he's here and he's in it, and this is home for him. And so we're talking through things, and he's just like, "So can we just want to ship some stuff?" And I was like, "Okay." And so we just decided the best way, because I just, our church is really downtown. It's kind of hard to park. We weren't the best space to have people coming into. And so we were like, just ship it to my house. Well, the next, like either later that afternoon or early the next morning, somebody shows up with a truck full and they just drop it in our living room. And it was just a person. It wasn't even, they're like, "Oh, we're going to Amazon ship you things." Well, then we start getting like 3 to 5 Amazon packages a day. And then we start getting, and then somebody else calls that, "Hey, I'll be at your house in like 2 hours." And I'm like, "All right, we're here. Come on." And so he's coming over and he drops off an SUV full of stuff and fills the back of our van. And we're still getting packages of batteries and flashlights and not phones, phone chargers and things like that, and all the stuff that's going on to do. And I feel like, man, it's crazy. And then we've got a friend who's in another one of our campuses that they were getting something like 60 boxes a day of people just shipping things through Amazon to their house to kind of go. And so it wasn't just like we had somebody, this is going to seem really minor, but it was a funny conversation at the end of it. Somebody gave on Sunday, and they didn't click, or I guess they gave a couple days before Sunday, but they gave online, but they didn't click disaster relief. And so it looked like it was just normal. Somebody's like, "Hey, who's this person?" And we're like, "We don't have a clue who that person is." And I just texted in the thread. I said, "Hey, by the way, all of us have sent this. We've had friends from literally the country, some around the world, that have said, 'Hey, how can we get money to you all?'" Some of them aren't very trusting of the government. Some of them just they know they trust us. It's just a bunch of different things. But they're like, "How do you make?" And I'm like, we've sent this literally all over the country, and they've shared it with their friends all over the country and I'm like, this could be anyone. And so it was just crazy cool to see those types of things um, happen. And then, we've got 2 or 3 churches that are coming and staying at our facilities and going to go out and serve and do do good and projects here in the area. One of them called me yesterday, and they're staying at our campus, and they're bringing in a skid steer, an excavator, a dump trailer, a trailer full of chainsaws and shovels and all that. And they're just like, "We're there." They've got about 3.5 days they can be here. They're just like, where do you need us?" And so I called 2 or 3 guys last night, and I'm going, "Where do we need this type of crew?" And that's been the thing too, is just people who are these feet on the ground people that are these central cogs of their communities. It's these, buddies of mine who their job is to be a principal, or to be an engineer, or, you know, good old boy that runs a landscaping business. And all of a sudden, because of their connections and their community involvement, like you said earlier, this thing has just revolved in around them, and they have been able to create such a system of help and care and things, and they're making stuff happen. And so, yeah, it's always weird when you're trying to work. I'm always kind of, I don't have any real distrust of the government or anything like that. I mean, it's not like something I live my life in worry and fear of every day. But I've just lived in small communities where somebody's house was in trouble, you went and helped them with their house. If somebody needed help on the farm, you went and helped them on the farm. You just did those things. And so this hasn't been anything unusual to me. It's just weird to see it at this volume because of the mass amount of people that were affected. Mainly in 2 states, I guess a little bit. I could know 3, I guess Virginia as well. And so in Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky has just been crazy cool.
My wife has been working with efforts with her real estate office, Keller Williams
Mm-hmm.
Realty in Johnson City. And to see what they've been doing has been absolutely mind blowing. They have a team of real estate agents, and you were saying people from all walks of life. Just these are just real estate agents that have been going and doing projects. And there's this group that their philosophy has been pretty cool. It's been like, we're sticking with a project until it's done. And so we'd been working at a house in Carter County that Carter County saw some of the most
It was
devastating
rough.
things. And they found out about the couple because it was the parents. I might get this a little wrong. Parents of one of the agents at their office there. And they're a couple that was in their 70s, and the water came in to their house so quickly that it was up to their chest, and they were able to make it outside and grab a hold of a chain link fence and start moving themselves along their fence line to try to get out of the water. And they're gripping. I'm sitting there listening to him tell me the story that had just taken place a couple days earlier by the time we were there. And he's pulling himself along. His neighbor across the street is another elderly lady, and she's yelling for him from her front porch as the water is about to sweep her away. She's yelling for help, and he's yelling back at her, "I'm sorry, I can't get to you. If I let go of this fence, I'm gone." And sitting there and just screaming across the street, wanting so badly to help his neighbor as she's terrified for her life. She was by herself there. And he and his wife, both in their 70s, pulling themselves through water that was up to their chest as they're trying to fight for their lives. And they got to the end of the fence line. And he said, "I told my wife, I can't go anymore. I don't think I can do anymore." And she's sitting there with him as they're telling us this story. And she said, "I told him, let's just turn the corner. Let's just turn the corner and see what happens. Just a few more steps." And he said, "I was ready to just let go and let the waters take me." And he said, "But she asked me to go a few more steps." So we pulled a few more steps. They turned the corner. And then at the end of the corner was a police officer in his car. And so they flagged him down, and he was able to get them rescued. But they lost absolutely everything. And so this team from Keller Williams Realty that my wife was heading up are coming in and got everything out of the house, got everything cleared out, ripping out sheetrock and tearing up floors and opening windows. And it was funny because we had this group of about 8 or 9 guys that, again, they're not construction workers. They're not contractors. They're not electricians. They're realtors is what they do. And they're in there with their equipment, tearing out sheetrock and mucking out just feet and feet of mud and sewage and nastiness. 2 cars had washed into these people's yard, one of them hitting their house, and cars that they don't know whose cars they are. They just ended up in their front yard. And to see this group coming through, and then they got all the heavy lifting done. They got all the strong manual labor, and all that was left to do was helping this couple sort through all of their boxes and boxes and boxes of keepsakes, pictures that were soaked and covered in mud, and spreading them out on the yard to try to dry out and see what could be salvaged. And so my wife and I stayed to keep helping with that for a couple of hours and get the front yard cleaned up. And this crew of men said, "Okay, we've done everything we can do here. We're off to the next house that needs help." And then they went to the next house and the next house and the next house. And it's been like that for a week now. That they were joking, saying, "Yeah, we're now a bunch." People were saying, "Were you contractors?" No, we're realtors. We're now broke realtors because we're not selling any houses because we're just helping with all of this. But
Not a lot of
this
houses
is
to
what we're
sell in
doing.
Northeast Tennessee right now either. So
Right. And so it's been incredible to see, again, the people that have just rallied and said, "I've got a truck. I've got 2 hands. What can we do here?" And that's been pretty remarkable to see. And the stories of love being displayed in ways that I think have left a whole lot of people humbled and beyond grateful and thankful. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about our episode on 9/11, is to see the way that when disaster strikes, one, the way that the church responds, but two, the way that a community that normally isn't looking for God turns to God for answers. And that's been pretty amazing to see as well.
Yeah, and it's real, like you said, it's been so special seeing everybody step in. The road is still crazy, crazy long for what this looks like. I think the thing that's hard for so many that if you lived in Florida or on the coast somewhere and things like that, flood insurance probably makes a ton of sense to you. That there's a lot of places in Northeast Tennessee and Western North Carolina that are nowhere close to a flood zone that are were literally wrecked by a flood. And I think that there was so many people when this thing hit that thought, hey, this stinks, but at least I have insurance. Everybody's my family's alive, everybody's okay, and I have insurance. And then that phone call, because people started making those calls pretty immediately, and they start finding out they don't have flood coverage and they don't have coverage for what's going on
And
in
even
their
if you
lives.
do, this family that I was telling you about that we worked at their house, they did have flood insurance because they were in a floodplain there. They were right along the river there, and their flood coverage for their house is they're trying to salvage the house, trying everything
Yeah,
we can, not know if it's going to be possible because they had more than a crawl space. It was a basement, but it was an unfinished basement, and until the water is completely out of the basement, the full extent of damage, but we were looking at it and saying there's foundation issues here that the water was just so strong and sitting so long on this foundation that there are problems. But what they got from their flood insurance was $35,000, and $35,000 won't even scratch the surface of what it's going to take for them.
that and I'm not trying to talk about where anybody lives or anything like that, but like in the most outskirt of communities that won't even buy the land anymore. I mean, not much less start to fix a house and to repair and build. Things are so expensive right now. Yeah, and so I think yeah, so that kind of stuff. And there's so many people who just thought their life was going to be one way and things are another. Hearing story after story of people who had made all the right choices, done all the right things, and then their life got swept away, and they paid off their house early. They lived in this, they lived in that, and they'd done all this work, and they'd gotten this and done that. And then, much like that older couple, they were just rushing, trying to get out, some of them fighting through water, some of them having just enough time to get ahead of that level of anxiety and stress and fear. Um, and then they turn a corner and come back to their house, 12, 24, 48 hours later, and they realize they've lost their cars, they've lost their home, they've lost everything, and there is no help. And so, I'm hoping that, again, there's some things I don't know that I don't fully understand and stuff that I'm just waiting for people smarter than me to kind of share. But, I'm hoping that there's some aid and some help with that. But I do know that there are some people who are smart people that are good leaders that have a heart for serving, that are starting to look at ways of, hey, let's like the government will do what they do. And hopefully the government does, the insurance companies and the government and all the entities that aren't really a part of our community, they'll do what they do. And these men and women are stepping in and going, okay, who do we rally together that when all of this is done and they've done all they're going to do, that we meet the need for the rest of it. And I don't know what that'll look like. And Paul talks about, and um I just this there's a couple of things for me that I've kind of grown in this space. And so been working through Galatians over the last little bit. We're working through Philippians now, but like had been in Galatians for a little while. And I just love, Paul's like, just don't grow tired, don't grow weary of doing good. And, it's one of those moments that right now there's so many volunteers. And there's a lot of times that you can walk into a space and them go, we just don't need you. But the reality is that there's always there. I mean, there's going to be months and months. I mean, they're saying that our interstates are 6 to 12 months from getting one of them fixed, much less the other one. And I mean, its power and things are months out for some people. And so we just hopefully, and I'm praying and I'm trusting that our community won't grow tired of doing good. And so clinging to that space, but also I just kind of reflecting in, Jesus inside of the moments that were the hardest for him. He took these moments of solitude and silence and got away for just a few minutes. It wasn't, I mean, it wasn't like he spent weeks. He spent moments in this space where he was quiet and he sat with the Father. And so I'm trying to live that as well, because I'm a touch more like, let's get to work, let's get going. And I can get so busy that I forget to kind of go, man, this thing begins with prayer and silence and sitting with the Father and going. And so, yeah, so locally, I think that's some stuff that like you're talking, man, I've got a friend who's an officer in Carter County. He just talks about grabbing people out of moving water. And I'm just going, man, if you were that close, and he's just like, that's not the concern at that point in time. Um, and so it's just crazy what the men and women who are our first responders and um, EMS, firefighters, law enforcement, and so many others, reservists and military. I mean, Blackhawks have just been those people. I've been the guy that it's been some guys, just dudes that I've been around with those. They have been nonstop, just in and out and coming in and grabbing a load full of stuff and flying up somewhere else and looking for people. And they're continuing to help find, thankfully still survivors as well. But unfortunately, sometimes it's been a little harder, find a little harder information there to get. But yeah, it's a unique community here in Appalachia, and yeah, thankful for that. I've gotten to grow up in spaces like this, and I still get to be a part of it.
So, what are some of the things that you've seen over the last week and a half that you've seen firsthand as you've been out? I know that you guys have been out almost daily working
Yeah.
on the ground.
So a lot of what we have done, I'll just speak for me. A lot of what I've done has been in the centers of just providing, and so my stuff's been a little bit more at times, um, just you know meeting people, loading stuff in their car, hearing their story. How can we get you some hot food? What else do you need? How can we help? I mean, and it's just random stuff I would have never thought about. People needing feed for their chickens and stuff like that, and showing up, and you know, businesses and people had donated those types of resources, and so able to help and do with some stuff that was there. But yeah, that's been there. But just the things like seeing stuff um outside of what we're talking about, like the body. Like I just declined a call there of a guy that I know probably has 7 projects today that he's like, hey, who's people we can put on these? Um, but outside of the body and seeing that, man, I would say that Carter County situation has been probably about as hard of a thing as I've looked at, because those I mean, you and I've sat on those baseball fields together. I mean, when our kids were playing games over there in middle school and things, and you sit over there and you kind of live in that space, and it's just like, it's gone. I mean, it came through and
We
it
had a
wiped
we
out
had a real
fences.
bonding moment on that field up there in Mountain City. If you remember that, where you
Mountain
shared your
City,
heater
yeah,
with me. Yeah.
yeah, we
And
did.
Mountain City is complete devastation right now.
And I haven't seen that one. I haven't been up that far yet, but yeah, just we were just talking before. I mean, there's one high school in our area, and I'm not gonna say names. People can figure things out pretty easily, probably with the Google. But we've got one high school that, while the structure is still standing, it has been basically deemed like, yeah, I mean,
Uninhabitable.
I just lost
Yeah.
words. It's
Uninhabitable.
yeah, thank you. I just couldn't get my brain to go. Um, And so, here's the school. And that's the thing for me is I kind of people are just like, well, maybe they'll have to split them up. And I'm going, you just can't do by the way, they're not. They found a way and how it's all going to go. But, I said, guys, this is going to seem really small and maybe petty. But you've got kids who are seniors in this school that have spent their entire lives waiting for this moment to be a senior on this football team, to have a senior night, to go to homecoming, to do these things, to be a part of this, and to just go, well, life happens. And I know we've got to look at the bigger picture of things, but I'm so thankful that that community has found ways to continue to move that forward. I know our team in Unicoi went off to play a football game this past Friday night, and they went away. And then when they got there, the school didn't charge admission to the team. They their entire concession stand, they sold everything for $1. And so it was just affordable for them to do to get stuff. So they didn't charge admission. They made the concession stand for $1. They gave gift bags and pizza and all this stuff to the cheerleaders, the band, the football players, and all this. I mean, and they just did so many things. And then at halftime, they presented a check. They let their band play with they let the away band play with the home band for the national anthem and things like that. And it's just been unbelievable for people to go, we realize you're hurting, and we're going to do everything we can to make this a space that you can start to feel loved and cared for. And so those have been very cool things.
There's so many opportunities out there, something for everyone to get involved with. We live in Jonesboro, and last weekend was supposed to be the biggest event for Jonesboro all year, the National Storytelling Festival.
Yeah, this past weekend was a big one for Irwin as well.
Yeah, with the Apple Festival.
Yeah.
The National Storytelling Festival will have 40,000 people from all over the world flood this little town of Jonesboro. They made the tough decision to cancel it at the last minute, I mean, days before. And one of our really good friends was going to be one of the headlining storytellers at that festival. He lives in Charleston, South Carolina, and he called us and said, "What do you guys need?" And with my wife kind of running the point on all of the needs in the community and the things that Keller Williams is doing in our area for that, she said, "Here are the things that we're having a really hard time finding in our area. They're sold out. People that aren't going to have phones for weeks, maybe months, or needing walkie-talkies. Walkie-talkies are sold out." So there were several different things. They're saying, you're far away. If you can get your hands on these things, we'll send you money to get these things. And he was like, done. And so he loaded up his car and drove what should have been a 6-hour trip from Charleston, but because the roads were closed, he had to go around through Charlotte and all of that, and added another several hours to his trip. And came in, dropped off a carload of supplies that were things that we couldn't get, spent the night with us here, and then headed out first thing the next morning. And just wanting to do something. My wife got up, much like you did today, got up early yesterday and went and packed lunches for first responders at a local restaurant that was giving away food. Packing like 400 or 500 meals for first responders that were going to be fed because people were wanting to care for them. I've had other people, like you've said, that have said, "Hey, I'm old. I can't get out and shovel mud and tear down houses, but I can write a check. Where's the biggest need?" And so there are so many different ways, no matter where you're at, no matter what your capabilities are, that you can be a resource. I think the danger, though, and you touched on this a little bit, is that we see the initial need and we respond to the initial need, but then we feel like, okay, we've done our part, and we go on with life and not realizing that need for a lot of these people is going to continue for months down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and so that's the thing is like it's if people are listening and they're like, hey, we want to get plugged in. I'm not saying there's not space now, but if your life feels busy right now and you're going, man, I just can't get over there, that's okay, because we're just now getting to a place where part of our communities are getting kind of dug out. and there's going to be a lot of opportunity to come and to make an impact and make a difference. And so just keep asking questions and keep reaching out, and there's ways to plug in for months and months to come.
Robert, one of the big things that we've seen in the news, and you were talking about social media and getting a lot of our information from there. One of the big things that's been happening is people have been talking about how if you're wanting to give, what organizations can we trust?
Mm.
So people that are listening to this that maybe are not in our immediate area, or maybe they even are, and they're just wondering, how can we help? How can we be of service? For those who are wanting to get involved, how can people ensure that the organizations that they're donating to are trustworthy and that the supplies that they're giving, their money that they're giving is actually going to the people that are in need, that they're actually helping and effective in the relief efforts?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to ask some of that. I don't know all those things. I will say two or three things. I know one, if you're local, and you're dropping supplies off at Bristol Motor Speedway and doing things like that, I mean, that's a Red Cross, FEMA, TEMA type of setup there. I believe, and that's my understanding. I believe that that's a more government, kind of space. You can designate, you can say, hey, I want my supplies to go to Unicoi, I want my supplies to go to North Carolina, so and so in North Carolina, I want supplies to go to this part of Tennessee or Virginia, and the supplies can go from there. I mean, literally, you pull up, and if you're a person, they take a little bit of information and they'll load the stuff in your car for you and send you on your way. If you're a deliverer, you show up and you give a little bit of information, you tell them where you're going, and sometimes they have lists, and then sometimes you have a list, and they put it on and send you on your way. If you're looking, like, I've just got friends that are like, hey, we want an organization that we know is on the ground, that's doing this stuff, that's sending people out and doing things. It's nothing malicious, nothing anti anything. It's just we just want to give to people that we know, and so we've provided some things like that we can do. Um, like I said, our church set up a way to give because of that, and we've been able to thousands of dollars have been able to go out because of that. And we've been able to buy just stacks of gift cards and deliver them to like the high schools or something like that and go, hey, we know that you all have people walking in here by the dozens needing gift cards for food or gas or whatever. And we're just able to kind of provide some of those things that we can do. We're also able to buy some supplies and do stuff. And so it's just been really crazy with all of that. So I think that talking to someone who's local that you trust is a great way to start. I don't know. I'm sorry to say this live on the air, and you can cut it out if you need to. I don't know if Higher Ministries has a way that people can give, because between the two of us, I mean, there's so many needs every day that we're bumping into, and sometimes that's just going and like you said, you're mucking out a house, and you realize, oh man, these people need a sump pump, and to go, if you can even find one, to go buy a couple $100 sump pump that's going to pull a whole basement. Me and a buddy of mine were out in Carter County, sump pump in a basement, and we had two of them going, and we're standing there and we're watching it go, and it's late, and there was a caretaker, this younger guy, a little younger than I am, that was there working with things, and we're like, hey, we're just going to leave this running, keep an eye on it. He's like, yeah, man, I'll keep an eye on it. And so he's a good old boy that's doing that. But I think those are probably the best ways that I would say. Again, I'm not anti, anything like that. I'm just, I just kind of grew up in a space where we just take care of things, and so if when I'm giving, I give to local people. I take supplies to the churches, like the church you delivered at, things like that. Yesterday, Chick-fil-A was out here, and they needed to deliver stuff to a couple of churches. And when I say Chick-fil-A, I just don't mean our local operators. They sent in this crazy like cooking trailer that they have, and they had operators from all over the Southeast that flooded in Kentucky, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. I mean, all of them, just Virginia, just flooded into our area. Now, our local operators were there as well, and I love seeing those guys and gals, and they are just such a great crew of people. But I was able to hang out with them some, and they were like, "Hey," and we hopped in one of their trucks and we drove around town and delivered supplies and things like that to people, and brought Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and everybody loves getting Chick-fil-A sandwiches. And so there's some good things that are there. Um, but also it's local people working with local people, and that's just kind of been my background. So again, nothing is anything. So I'm not going to pitch my church, or kind of throw that out there. If that's something you want to, we can talk. I mean, I'm not saying that, but I know
Well,
Higher Ministries.
I think that pitching your church is great because you guys are doing something with it, and so
Yeah, I
I
mean,
wouldn't
you can
want
go
to
to
sit here and
nrcc.church. It's nrcc.church/give and click the little arrow that says that disaster relief. And if that's what they want to do, that's fine. I don't know if, like I said, Higher Ministries, I'm sure there's a way they can give to that, and we can do that same thing and push those funds out that way.
yeah, and I think that's something that is important. And I know you have done this some, and then I talked about our friend who came in to bring supplies. There are a lot of critical supplies that are needed that we don't have in our area because
Yeah.
they've been bought out.
Yeah,
I hate to
generators,
keep
grills, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I hate to keep coming back to it, but I've been so incredibly impressed by my wife's company, Keller Williams Realty. They have a whole branch called KW Cares, and there were all these things, several of the things that you just mentioned that were needed in our community that you could not find. And so they had a Keller Williams branch out of somewhere else. I don't even know where it was, far, far away, that they had access to those things because they weren't in a disaster area. And so they loaded up two 26-foot U-Haul trucks and drove them through the night to get here. And we were able to be there and be a part of unloading those trucks and all of that, and seeing all of these supplies that people desperately, desperately need. I mean, probably 10, 15 generators that we pulled off of these trucks, and not pickup trucks, 26-foot
Yeah,
U-Haul
yeah,
trucks
yeah.
that
That's awesome.
they backed up, that were able to get unloaded. And then as soon as they were unloaded, the drivers ate some lunch and hit back the road to head back home, just because they had access. And so maybe you have access to some things. If you have stuff that you would like to know what is needed, again, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to Robert through, what was the website again?
nrcc.church/give. So yeah, they can do that too.
nrcc.church/give. You can also go to higherministries.com and find out how you can be involved, how you can help, and we can put you in contact with the best way to give, the best way to help in that. Robert, I want to spend some time talking about you being a pastor at a local church in one of the hardest hit areas. I want to talk about how you've seen the church respond to this, how you've seen the church step up in this moment and really truly be the body of Christ in this, how you've seen the church in this time of crisis become really a source of hope for the community.
Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy, kind of interesting to just watch some of it from a distance, some of it really close up, just people. And I see online, and people are like, "Hey, we're making 3 runs today." And it's just it's one of those moments where people are like, eventually I'll have to go back to work, and they don't know what that looks like or what doesn't look like. But it's things aren't cheap, and gas isn't cheap, and that kind of stuff. And people take these side by sides and ATVs, UTVs, and all this stuff, and they're hopping in and just going and being the church, and they're meeting these needs in a way that not everybody can. Everybody doesn't have a pickup truck. Everybody doesn't have a utility vehicle that they can kind of go. And just seeing people with uh, you know like, Tony, let's just be really transparent. I mean, like, your bridge situation, while like you said, on this side of it, it feels like, hey, there's probably not wasn't a lot of concern. But in a moment where they're going, hey, this might not be structurally okay, but if we don't get you up and back, before they shut this bridge down, we don't, with this is the last supplies that will go to these people. And people just being willing to step in and go, hey, Father, not my will, but yours. Because my will at that point in time would be to go, oh, that's cool. Hey, I'll run back out here tomorrow when you all get the bridge checked by a structural engineer. And, I think FEMA is one of the organizations that comes in and checks those things. And I'm like, hey, when you're doing that, cool, holler at me. I'll be
Mhm.
back and then we'll run this bad boy all day long. But, this whole not my will, but yours be done type of thing, and sitting in those moments of listening and hearing, um, just watching everything from little kids to, like you said, people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, this wide range of people going, I may not be able to do blank, but I can do something. And so, sometimes it's, the little kid or the 70-year-old holding the water hose and spraying the floor while the rest of us are shoveling things out. Sometimes it's the little kids carrying the bottles that have broken, the packs that have broken and doing things. But just the body really stepping in and being in that space, people willing to go so far above and beyond. And just sacrifice the sleep and time and work and so many things. It's just something that's so different than I believe the vast majority of us get to see. And just in fairness, we don't always have chances to live like this. Thankfully, this isn't something that we go through every week. But I also think it's a moment where it brings us back to a place where we're looking and going, man, this is what the body of Christ is supposed to be, and it's really cool to see that lived out.
Yeah, in our community here, we have, I don't remember exactly what the number is, but something like 750 churches within a 15-mile radius of where we live. And to see the impact that could be had if all of those churches were mobilized the way that we've seen a handful of churches moving. We have a friend of our family who is not a believer, but who has been a part of many, many different organizations working in natural disasters all over the country and really all over the world. And she put out a post last week saying, so many people are asking, what can we do to help? What is the best way? We asked the question earlier, what are reputable organizations that you can give to? And this is someone who is not a believer that said the number one place to go in this time is churches, that churches do an amazing job of mobilizing their people, making sure that the resources get where they're needed, and that nothing is wasted. And so I think a great testament that people that are not even believers or not church goers see that,
Yeah.
no, this is our number one recommendation of where you should go, because the church is going to do some great things. Well, that's all the time that we have for this edition of the Small Church Podcast. We want to thank you for tuning in. We will continue this conversation on the recovery efforts of Hurricane Helene and how the church has helped and how you can help. If you would like to dive into this conversation and help, you can visit higherministries.com to find out more. We'll see you again next week as we continue the conversation.